So this is a tool that we developed and launched last week, and it essentially builds on the Cycling UK map that is capturing where temporary interventions are being made. And we wanted to really give the public a way of feeding back their thoughts on temporary infrastructure, temporary interventions in their locality. So it's a web-based map that you can go onto and click on an intervention that's close to you or that you want to comment on, and there's a simple short survey that when you click on one of the maps, one of the icons, takes you a short survey. You fill in some fields around what you think of the interventions. So what we hope it will do is it will gather information from the public on what they think about some of these interventions that are going in. It's not public consultation, it's not monitoring and evaluation, but we hope that it will provide a snapshot of how the people that are responding feel about the changes, and provide us with data that can support conversations with local authorities about what they've provided, whether they could be tweaked, and then also point to other places and use it as evidence that, or as information that can help make the case for other interventions. That's pretty much it in terms of where we are with it. We've to date, just looking on the system earlier, 50 schemes have been logged. We don't let the public log schemes. They can tell us about schemes that we haven't shown, but we're sort of retaining control over what actually gets put up there, and we sort of categorise them into creation of temporary protected cycleways, installation of planters and the like for modal filters, reduced speed limits, closure of streets to motor vehicles, widening of footways, and then other measures. And so far we've had 154 responses, which seems to be quite positive. So yeah, we'll keep on gathering this information and yeah, use it to inform discussions with local authorities.
Hi. Yeah, basically, I've had a couple of people in councils start asking what they can use as like an emergency map for gathering feedback. So basically taking proposals, so ideas, and collating them. And at the moment, in Baines, they use Fix My Street, and they have the pro version, so they can actually add in a new category with subcategories. So they could do a COVID-19 emergency transport response category with items underneath. This seems to be more about once a scheme is up and running, you can then put feedback up onto that, rather than you can add new ideas and new proposals and get those kind of rolling. Is that, am I correct on that?
Yes, that is correct. Yes, we're about, it's about capturing feedback on schemes that have been implemented rather than gathering ideas about where schemes could be implemented.
Because I would say this is one of those key areas now that councils are starting to try and reach out into the public in a very quick way. And I know there's common spaces that they could use, or there are other ones out there. But the one, they're just trying to bodge anything together to try and get that motion going. And I'm just, has anybody got any ideas of things that could be used for that? Because this looks useful, but it's almost a hindsight tool rather than a, yeah, it's a good thing to see happening, but it doesn't really allow you to communicate with your council and trying to communicate those ideas going forward.
Commonplace have been doing a lot of stuff. We had like Mapping GM up in Manchester, and we were thinking of throwing that open and getting comments that way. But the Commonplace platform, I think in some places are offering it at a discount or free. Quite a few local authorities are having that conversation, and then you can log it, other people can comment on it. It's quite a good social media one. Other services are available, but it does seem to be like quite a decent place to put it. And like I've been saying all the way along, taking a picture, sending an email still works. It does still work if you want to see some change in your area, particularly if you've got evidence of somewhere where people can't social distance, or the issues. If you're congregating around waiting for try and cross the road at the traffic light, it's always a good one for getting your signal timings changed.
I have developed another tool for mapping asks for the COVID or any other scheme. And the tool has gone live last week, and I'm currently documenting it. and you can see it on our website, and it is a potentially usable tool by others. The basis of the tool is that there is a Google spreadsheet curated by one person, where each row has some details about a particular scheme, and the rows include a street view, and the street view takes you points to where the scheme is, but you can actually see it with a marker on the map. So I'm going to put that in the chat, and people can have a look at it, and it's going to be available for wider use by the end of this week. I've got documentation.
So we've been talking about interventions that could be used during the crisis in there, some kind of basic ones. And on a previous session, I went through kind of 12 things we could do, ranging from like decluttering and to signal timings to 20 miles an hour to like physical distance spaces to temporary crossings. You kind of name it. All the stuff that I'm happy to see was most of which was put in the DFT guidance at the weekend of what you could do. But there was like a 13th element that I'll want to talk about now. And really, the way I think side road zebras will help at the moment is drivers are being quite nice at the moment. I know people are speeding and you get a few idiots in there, but it is quite nice generally walking around there, and people are expecting people to walk in the road. They understand why. There's some fairly nice behaviour. So as cars start coming back in and people start going back to work and you can't use public transport, and we all hope that they do walk and cycle, but I think we've got to acknowledge that there's going to be a lot more people driving, getting on the roads there. It'd be nice if some of that attitude and some of that behaviour was maintained. That's my long-winded intro to like the joys of side road zebras. I've shown one there on the front page that we put in when we launched the B-Lines document. Oh, so many years ago now. Was it like a year and a half, 2 years? It all melds in there. So we marked one of these in just to show how normal it is. And nobody on that street even recognised there was anything weird or different or novel or anything about it. And we did one on the other side of the road. And I will say at this stage that we put it down there, and there was a little bit of, oh, you can't put a zebra in without a beacon and the zigzags and the full rigmarole. But we marked one of these markings on the side road opposite, and then I spent the next hour walking out in front of cars, like timing it perfectly so that I was arriving, not looking at them as they were turning in there. And I'm still here, and it was in the middle of Salford in there. And I wouldn't recommend that you try that if these markings weren't in there, but we'll get to it. So I kind of felt we were onto something. I just want to talk a little bit about why zebras are exciting and why they can help us. Let's read this from the regulations on zebras in there. Every pedestrian who is on the carriageway within the limits of a zebra crossing, miss a little bit, has precedence within those limits over that vehicle, and the driver must accord such precedence to any such pedestrian in there. That's the only real legal way I know of assigning some kind of like implied priority to pedestrians in there. It's pretty much as close to strict liability as we get in the UK there. If you're hit on a zebra, it's like, well, did you not see the zebra? What were you thinking about? You didn't expect someone to cross at a crossing point in there. There's a real like onus on the driver to be more careful in this kind of situation. So I quite like the regulations around zebras in there. And frankly, if that's the behaviour we want from drivers, for them to see their priority to pedestrians at side roads in there, why not use the marking that already has the attribute to it in law? That's was one of the original ideas behind it in there. I should have started with a disclaimer, got all distracted. So obviously I work with Chris Borden up in Manchester, and we're pushing all this one, but I'm saying this just as a friendly ideas with beers down the pub, having a chat. Nothing that I'm saying is not in the public domain, and there are things I know, but there's things I won't say, so I'm just keeping it all strictly legal and above board. Anyway, back to business. We showed this visualization in the B-Line document of like wouldn't side roads work a lot better if we just had this kind of markings in there? It was just like there was this line in it that Chris Boardman often says that walking and crossing the street shouldn't require bravery. And that was if you've ever tried crossing a side road in the UK, and I'm assuming most people have, and let's talk about the pedestrian experience for the moment in there. You're always looking out, will the car turn, will they not? Will I make it to the other side? What speed are they going to come in there? I'm expecting to jump out of the way. As part of the initial research on this one, I was doing, I get around the world a bit, and I was doing 2-hour walks wherever I ended up at a conference, and I did one in Moscow, in Taiwan, and I did one in Paris, and just went for a 2-hour walk. Mainly I was getting signal junction timings, because that's the kind of fun thing I do on my 2-hour walks. But one of the other things I was looking for was behaviour at side roads in there. And in the 2-hour walk across Paris in there was 9 occasions when drivers had to stop and yield to me when I was walking across the side road on the zebra, and they all did. Now, I did the same 2-hour walk in Manchester in there, and there was 7 drivers, 7 occasions where cars could have yielded. I was already well established crossing the road in there, but they didn't, and I had to get out of the way sharpish. That's the kind of difference in there, that kind of fear, that kind of beep, get out of the way, that kind of fear you have crossing every single side road in there. So, like I say, when we did try one out in Salford, it seemed to get very similar effect to the one in Paris. So it's very exciting in there, just to show what these things could look like in there. This one, I think it's from Germany, actually, the one on the right. There's a kind of standard side road in there that you might want to cross if you're trying to get to the other side. You can see there's a big sweeping radius on it on the left there. I would expect drivers to be zooming in and out there the way they do. There isn't any giveaway markings in there, like perhaps that would have helped, or maybe it would make it look even more road-like. Who knows? But I think most people would acknowledge that the one on the right there, even though it's pretty much exactly the same geometry as the one on the left, looks a lot more inviting to cross, and would give people some confidence that you might actually get it to the other side. And more importantly, you'd expect a driver to kind of slow down and yield if that kind of marking was in place. All seems obvious, I know, at this point, but we still have to make the case. So, yeah, lots of cyclists on this call. So I want to talk about getting cycle tracks past side road. Like I write a lot of guidance, and I do a lot of advice to people, and I do a lot of training in there. And I always start by saying we don't really know how to get a cycle track past the side road. There's stuff we tried in different contexts, and I can tell you what the results are on them. But the kind of state of the art as we speak at the moment is probably this approach from Waltham Forest, the kind of continuous footway. So that is an actual side road that we're kind of looking right in the middle of. There's a kind of step cycle track running right the way across there. You'd expect drivers coming in and out of that to kind of yield to cyclists and hopefully yield to the pedestrians as well, or certainly give way further back into the junction in there. So that's kind of state of the art. But here's one from Enfield, I believe, or is it still Waltham Forest there? I lose track. Where they've used the elephant footprints to mark out the side road track there, but we've still got asphalt coming through there. Again, I think it'd be fairly effective at kind of slowing vehicles down somewhat, but in our kind of what if bit of Photoshop skills that I use there, for me, if people say to me, Brian, how do you get a cycle track past the side road? I want to just say, do that. Because for me, that's the clearest thing we could possibly do. You've got the markings for the cycle track, and you've got the zebra enforcing it in there. So it's basically a parallel crossing past every side road. So hot on the heels, if we ever do get it approved to actually do a side road zebra, I'll be pushing to tie it in with elephant footprints and do a kind of parallel crossing in there. And then for me, a lot of issues are gone. Certainly the Waltham Forest approach is brilliant, and I swear by it, but it's quite an expensive approach. If we can get as powerful as an effect as that with just some paint, then I don't think we can sniff at this. All right. A little bit more. Okay, let's talk about the research that's been going on at the moment. And all this research is available on the TFGM website, should you want to actually check the results in there. And I think one of the people that actually did this research is on the line as well, so he can jump in when I start ad-libbing on the stats. Yeah, so what did we actually research? It's in about 7 parts, and like all things at the moment, including the economy, it's been paused. So it's a little bit frustrating that we're getting towards the real fun bit of the research, the actual on-street trials, but we've had to pause it somewhat because we're not in our normal situation. We're not in normal conditions there. But we have undertaken several parts of the research, and there's 2 main bits that I want to talk you through. One of the things we looked at was the safety record of this. So this is on site right now, This is not too far from my house, an absolute beauty in there. Very much a side road zebra, and as far as I'm concerned, within the bounds of the public highway as well, for those technical people listening in there, albeit it's at the entrance to a hospital at Luton and Dunstable, where my children were born. Anyway, by the by, what we asked the Transport Research Laboratory to look at was, how does that compare with nearby side roads? Is there anything worse about the collisions? Is there anything better? And basically, what they said was there was no real difference. In most of the places what we've got this, and this thing that we can't do, that is the side road zebra, and it doesn't have beacons, and it doesn't have zigzags, doesn't even have tactiles. There's stuff in there that makes it non-compliant, and it's not set back 20 metres into the junction either. That's another thing about it. But they are out there, and then I did a kind of Twitter ask. I said to people, do you know of any side road zebras in the public highway that interface with like a public highway land with no zigzags, no beacons? And we've got over 100. So there's over 100 of these things that exist in the UK. If I said to people, send me pictures of them, which people have been doing, there's thousands in all the hospitals, in all the shopping centres, all the supermarkets, that they're everywhere. It's very hard not to see these things that we can't actually legally do at the moment. That's the thing to know. Excuse my kids screaming in the background. But anyway, the findings from the safety study, looking at Stats 19 reports over the years, what happened on these ones, what happened on nearby side roads, there was no real difference. There wasn't a huge amount of collisions on the nearby ones, and certainly wasn't any on these ones. So when it comes to safety, I'm always like, no news is good news. So the fact that there was nothing to report didn't seem that putting this marking down in the UK had any kind of detrimental effect on safety in there. So that was good. That's point one of the research done. Let's talk about a little bit more of an interesting one that gave us some insights. We did some kind of photo stimulus trials of like what if, from the picture on the left there is from the pedestrian perspective, and the one on the right there is from the driver's perspective. And we asked drivers and we asked pedestrians, do you recognise what that is? And the figures are there with spoilers like below in there, but from the driver's perspective, 93% of the drivers recognise that that's a zebra. So I know we probably could have figured that out, that the most recognisable road marking in the whole world is recognisable, but that's still good to know, and it's still good to put a figure behind it. So we're kind of we're on the way there. Certainly all pedestrians did there. But more importantly, when drivers did see the zebra there, 82% of them said that they would give way to pedestrians on it, which is like a real win, particularly when I explained the situation I had, like doing a 2-hour walk around Greater Manchester. I could have done it in London, I could have done it in Bristol, I could have done it in Glasgow, I could have done it anywhere and got similar results where we don't have this. But like the driver said that they would know to yield and give way to pedestrians on there. Now they should do anyway. If they're looking at highway code rule 170, they should give way to anybody that's established in the footway. But they certainly don't seem to be doing that from the experience of walking around. Maybe you've had different experiences, or you live in a nice place, who knows. But yes, we tested other markings as well. I've not shown them in this presentation. There was like footprints, and there was like different colours. But then in this particular test, only 22% of drivers recognised the next best scoring marking and knew that, and said that they would give way to it. So that, and the actual no crossing at all was only 3%. Sorry, that's only 3% higher. So it's only 3% lower for the no crossings at all. So basically, other different markings don't seem to work in terms of giving priority in there. It was a little bit worrying because we've been pushing kind of colourful crossings and stuff, and they don't seem to be understood by drivers as one of the things that came out of the research in that. And if you want to know more about that, I'd suggest you actually have a look at the full report in there. But like these are pretty golden stats in there. What we're trying to do, make drivers give way to pedestrians who are walking across side roads. Okay, well 82% are saying that they're going to do that. Now that's not perfect, a lot of people say, but it's not 100%, Brian. It's not 100%. There's going to be a risk. There's going to be someone that's run over them there. And really, when it comes to engineering, it's always a little bit of a balance of probabilities things. We never have a beyond reasonable doubt. There's always going to be some kind of a issue in the system, as it were. There's going to be collisions that happen and take place. But if you can increase, or decrease the probability that it's going to happen in the given event by the amount that's shown in the stats there, then I think it's well worth investigating.
I just think the key point, I hadn't thought about this before today, but I noticed that you changed the time waiting at crossings in Manchester on your lights controlled crossings to stop people grouping at the road waiting to cross, so that they maintain physical distance. And that's surely the main point about these side roads, is that you can keep walking and not wait as car after car after car turns in. And otherwise, the cars are going to see a line of people queuing up 2 meters apart.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, I could talk all day about the implications of zebra, and often do, particularly when it comes to signalised zebras. But at the moment, I'm trying to keep it simple to say, actually, this is a temporary marking that we could do that the entire rest of the world does, and actually gives us the behaviour we want. Actually protects the people that are out at the moment that are walking and getting around there. And particularly as there's less cars on the road, it might slow down vehicles and help people get about their business. So, yeah, like one of the things that you'll notice in Paris if you go for a walk, hello there, Mike, is that you can just keep strolling. You can just keep walking and walking and walking, and people know to give way to, because they've got this kind of marking at the side road. I don't think the French are any better behaved than we are, but they do know that that's a zebra there. You've got priority in there. So you can keep a conversation going. In the UK, you're strolling through our city centres every time it's a side road. So everybody stop, shout at the kids, have a little look there, what's going on there? Will I make it to the other side or not? And then you're starting again. It's not good for productivity. It's not good for our mental health. And I'll let Mike come in now. Did you want to say something? I've got someone unmuted. Yep.
Sorry, but I don't know if you can see us. I'm going to come in here if I can, Mike, for Perth. Just, have the DFT set out any kind of guidance in terms of the research you're doing? Are there certain levels you have to kind of attain?
Yeah, absolutely. When we came up with the research questions, we worked very closely with DFT to say, basically, what is it you need to be convinced? Like, we had a legal discussion at the start, but like I met with Jesse Norman, who was the minister at the time, and Chris Boardman and DFT, and we were talking about, well, what is it that you need? And he said, well, do some full research. And when we put the questions together, we made sure that we're answering their needs, and that's really the way the thing's been structured. Like I say, I'm fairly convinced already. I've done my tests with myself in there, but yeah, the whole research has been done in partnership with DFT, and they've been working with us. They've been on the call every 2 weeks. We've been going through each stage of the research in there. So as far as I'm concerned, they've been playing ball. The only issue I have now is the pause in the research, and just thinking, if we just got that thing going early and we'd had it, this would be perfect for the situation we find ourselves in. That's the frustration I share at the moment. But yeah, the questions are put together to answer DFT's legitimate concerns with introducing anything new. I mean, the beacons were put onto zigzags for a reason in there. But I've been trying to argue right from the get-go that there's a big difference between a mid-link zebra that takes priority away and a side road zebra where drivers have to yield priority to it. That's called a priority junction for those reasons. And so I've been trying to argue that there is a big difference in there. I mean, initially they were saying, well, if you put too many of these things in, people will start disrespecting, and that's what happens when we put too many zebras in the 60s. And I was going, well, it's a very different situation. It's not like I'm putting them every 20 meters along a link where they've already got priority and they have to keep slowing down and stopping. That can get frustrating for drivers in there. Maybe it's a frustration that we'd want them to have, and then they might walk and cycle. But by the by, but when they're turning into and out of a side road, they should be looking to yield priority in there. So for me, it just reinforces that. Yeah, it's a question. Do you want me to follow up, or any other questions?
Brian, I have a question. Yep. Stephen in Bristol Cycling. Can't we link Shap's Saturday announcement, the COVID measures, with this experiment? Couldn't it be part of the experimental work that you're doing, or do you think that's an illegitimate link?
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously reading the announcement like word by word in there, and there was it mentioned the stuff that it was related to and the traffic order process in there. There wasn't any statements about trialing anything new though, which is kind of what I was looking for. It was more like these things are well established. crack on and do them in there. I was looking through Signing the Way, a document that came out in 2011, which I don't know whether people have read it, but it's a really good read. But there's some really good statements from Norman Baker at the time. He was like I always forget the titles, but effectively like the minister with a portfolio for walking and cycling in there. And he was saying statements like they were happy to support trials, even if they were against the current regulations, and to make it easier for local authorities to test stuff out there, particularly in like traffic management situations. And so the statements that have been made in the past, obviously that document's no longer live, and it was just like a traffic science policy paper. But I'm hoping similar statements could come out if people saw the benefits of this. Just the kind of downside is we haven't got the full set of evidence. What we have got, I think, is compelling, but we haven't done the on-street tests, like the fully monitored ones. We did those initial ones, but I can understand how there's some reticence. But I'm hoping that we see the benefits of doing this, and it's a way of like cheaply and quickly getting some pedestrian priority over there. And it obviously has big benefits to cyclists, because one of the main issues with cyclists is left and right hooks, and particularly at priority junctions in Greater Manchester. That's one of our real big ones. So yeah, there wasn't anything per se that you could hang it on in that announcement, but I'm hoping it's the start of like, let's do something, let's get stuff rolled out there, be proactive. There's a real strong cause for people to do stuff. So I'm hoping if enough local authorities said, actually, we think that would work, can we do that? And if there's enough people asking for it, and that's kind of one of the reasons I'm doing this talk and like flagging it up again, if there's enough people asking for it, then hopefully they'll see the light. And I think most of the ministers are supporting of it as an approach, just a question of like lining it up properly. But I think if there's, well, we'll have to see what they say, but I think if they see it in a good light, now's the time to test stuff, even if it's on like a few months. Let's give it a go and see what it works with the situation we're in. Because everybody's fearful of like a second peak as the cars come back, and you're struggling to cross the side roads, and you think, oh my God, the cars are back in the car, then the congestion comes in, the air quality gets worse, the people are more likely to get ill from the virus. And I think people can join the dots a lot more now than they ever have done in the past. So I'm hoping that like it raises itself in the kind of ideas of the ministers, and you think actually that's a solution that could work right now. So hopefully. But we will need a new statement beyond what was said on Saturday. Long answer to a short question. That's what I'm fighting for. Any other ones?
Brian, it's Phil from Tunbridge Wells. Is there a financial hook here then for local authorities? Because you mentioned sort of £300 or £400 to put some white paint on the ground. In Tunbridge Wells, we've got a number of junctions where they've applied continuous paving through pavements either side, but in my experience it's just not effective.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I kind of swear by continuous footways. I think they are great, but they can be very expensive depending on what context you do it in and what kind of materials, and making sure the bedding's right and making sure that it is continuous. So yeah, it can start stacking up to hundreds of thousands if you're in a different context with them. Whereas if you've got like a £300 or £400 solution, it's worth looking at. And even then, you could like make sure the curbs are dropped, do a little bit of spot maintenance in there, get some tactiles in there. You're still around about the £1,000 mark, and that is something that you could roll out quite quickly, I think. And even if you just put the white line markings in and then did the maintenance later, they were effective from the get-go, which I like to think we showed in Salford a couple of years ago, that they were instant. Like in Salford, it was kind of interesting because the road safety team went down and had a look at it the next day, and really to say this doesn't work and come out, but they all came back and went, actually that's great, yeah, let's just keep it. It's only when they're reminded that maybe the regulations weren't quite there for them to keep it in there. But in terms of practice and cheapness, it's definitely a bit of a winner.
Ryan, it's Kate. I'm Kate.
Hi, Kate.
Kate Carpenter in Normal Life. I'm Kins on here. Did the DFT have a view about whether these would be controlled or uncontrolled in law, or are they going to be a third category, bearing in mind that they're about to commission the rewriting of the tactile guidance, and this could be a third category that's not yet covered by it?
Yes. Well, it's up to DFT to tell me, but my advice, and I'd be interested to see what you'd say as well, would be that these are controlled, that it's a
That
full...
means you've got to change the tactile at all of them. That's really expensive.
Yep.
Everyone would have to have L-shaped tactile.
Well, we can get into that. Not necessarily, because there are like plenty of precedents where there isn't L-shaped tactile. Like from an engineering point of view, it's guidance on it's tactile paving guidance in there. If you're walking along the street and it couldn't be missed, so it's not like you have to pick up a crossing point in there. But I will say, even if you put the markings in and it wasn't fully legal and controlled till you have the right tactile, which again is a few leaps in there, but you'd still have it being effective in there. You can say, okay, well, it's a fully prescribed, legal, controlled zebra crossing in there once you get all these details right. But in TSRGD, it doesn't specify the tactiles for the marking to be legal, even when it's controlled.
No, I was thinking in terms of people who are partially sighted, not completely blind. Somebody's partially sighted, they see the stripes, see priority, but then that's at odds with the tactile and that uncertainty. And in practice, as a road safety engineer, in practice, my gut sense is this stuff works. We just need to, give that access. The trouble is we've created a whole rake of pseudo zebras in different pseudo zebras across main links with public realm, urban design schemes. We've got a whole rake of different things, trying to understand, are they legal control crossing, priority crossings? Do we change the law to change the priority? In many ways, I'd rather not. I mean, if somebody said we abandon the L control crossings, in many ways, safety engineer, I wouldn't have that big a problem with it, because in practice, as you say, in many cases, you don't actually need the stem. But what DFT have instructed is it will still have the L. The new guidance will have it. We just bid for it. I'm sure you're involved in other bids. It will have the same form. So that means every single one is going to have an L.
Yeah, well, my dream is to make more of guidance tactile at the end of the day to get around this, because I've always felt L's were difficult to orientate themselves off. But just want to say about the legality of it, that across a cycle track you can put a zebra in there without beacons and zigzags, and it's a full controlled crossing, and it has all the legal weight of it. And that's really all we're asking for here. And but I do think there's a lot of nuance to the use at the side road compared to the mid-link one. And I've been trying, from the get-go with the Department for Transport, to say this is not a mid-link implied zebra in there. This is just like a reinforcement marking, and it's a place where we should have a more control of our crossings in there. And with the visually impaired groups that I've spoken to, and I have spoken to a lot, and we've got the Disability Design Reference Group in Manchester in there. So this is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be signal control across every side road in there, but it'll give you there'll be a much higher propensity for cars to yield to you. And you've got a higher than you did before chance of making it to the other side. And that's really what engineering's about. So again, like I'm talking to the expert on, we can never give perfection in there, but if we're looking that we can reduce the number of lives taken in there, and our conservative estimates are a 20% drop in the collisions in there, we have to take that seriously. That's actual lives saved.
I think our law stifles us. I think the TSRGD and the traffic science manual less so, but I do think they stifle us. And it would be nice that we had more space for innovation. Thank you.
Yep. Gwen Ruth.
Is it an urban myth? I was once told by a traffic engineer that one reason you don't have crossings at side roads is because it holds traffic up on a main road, and at all costs we have to keep traffic moving. But is that an urban myth, or is it reality? And are you working on that not being, because that is also what holds up people being able to turn into a side road?
It's not an urban myth. The classic kind of road safety one, and you normally get this if you tighten a side road and you put a side road entry treatment in there. And we kind of won this battle in London, but I still hear it everywhere else I go, that if you do something that would slow down a car turning into it, then there's a risk of a shunt from behind as they slow down. So if you're on a 40-mile-an-hour road and you tighten and put a zebra, they could slow right down to zero, which means that another car could hit them from behind in there. And it's it's always been a little bit of a nonsense for me, because we need cars to slow down. If we design side roads for them to not slow down, then they won't slow down, and that's a problem for pedestrians crossing in there. So that's the case we made when we were tightening a lot of junctions in London. was involved in hundreds of those things going in side road entry treatments. And just like, yes, they'll slow down. We need them to slow down. If a refuse truck can take it at 30 miles an hour in the lane, that means everybody else can do it at 40, which will make it really intimidating for pedestrians to cross and basically create unsafe side roads like we've got. So yeah, no, you still get that issue. I've still seen that fairly recently in road safety audits in there. So I'm gonna send Kate at them next time. Get that. Tim, did you want to come in?
Always available.
Brian? Yeah, can I come? Have you walked over one of your side road crossings with somebody from the Department of Transport? Because we found, I was involved with the speed cushion trials way back in the 1990s. And initially the Department of Transport said no. And then they said, and we then organised a trial off-road and invited the civil servants up. And as we drove over the first set of speed cushions with this guy from the Department of Transport, Eric, he was called, can't remember his second name. He just turned to me and said, "I think we could manage these." So I would encourage you. Have you done that?
Well, like that's kind of what happened when we did the lighter zebra across the cycle track, and we kind of built one in the middle of the forest with TRL with the beacons and zigzags, and went, that looks a bit silly, doesn't it? So we could do a lighter version. He went, "Yeah, all right. I've been begging them." And I'm not even using the word that lightly. I've been literally begging them to let me just take them over on the Eurostar, have a little 2-hour walk around Paris, buy them some croissants, and just say, "What do you think of that?" But the usual response, "Well, that's France, and that's Paris, and we're the UK, and how will it work in the middle of Barnsley?" And they go, "I think it'll work fine." It worked pretty well in the middle of Salford when we said, and like I said, that's why we concentrated with the research to answer that question of looking at the 100 or so examples that we got on public highway in the UK and saying, well, have they worked these things that we can't do? But yes, there's always that offer there to actually go and experience them, and it's night and day walking in any country where they've got them in there. You still have to watch out for yourself, but the propensity for vehicles to give way as you're crossing is great. But some people might argue that it's that, and you often get this one when people get really perverse about it, the false sense of security, that you don't want people stepping out. Given that cars are going to turn into side roads fast and they're absolute maniacs, you should be getting people out of the way, and you shouldn't be encouraging them to step out there with any increased confidence. And that's one thing that we looked at in the research as well. There was a question of of pedestrians, would you feel confident to step out? And the question of drivers, would you actually yield to it? And then one of the worrying things that came out with some of the colourful crossing options, that pedestrians had an increased level of confidence, but drivers had no understanding of it whatsoever, which was my road safety nightmare scenario in there. But when we did it with the zebras, people felt confident to step out, and drivers knew they had to give way in there. And that's the.
They're in many supermarkets, car parks, these zebras, so people are used to them, and they will yield to them when they're driving slowly. Yeah, we probably all experienced that as a shopper and a driver.
Well,
then arguably that's the same as Luton Airport, where Luton were fined 350 grand for a pedestrian who was killed on something that only had stripes. That was very low speed by a car park, between a car park and a terminal. So that's why I was wondering about DFT's view about legality.
Oh yeah, they certainly mentioned that case to me lots. But again, it was Midlink, and it was kind of a bit of a health and safety at work scenario as well. It wasn't public highway. If we were picked up on all the wrong things we do on public highways, we'd all be doing several life sentences. And I say that as an engineer who's done many things wrong on a public highway.
Yeah.
One of the things about Luton was that there wasn't a design for it. They put it in without a design. So if there was a design that was approved and they put it in, then they'd be effectively covered. It was the negligence of putting in something that hadn't been formally approved as a design standard. That was the main reason.
Yeah, if you're doing anything new, you've got to have a risk logger. There's a few people that have had their hands up for ages, so I just want to bring Simon Monk. Did you want to come in at this stage?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, from the Waltham Forest Mini Holland perspective, part of this as well is a network planning kind of function as well. If you've got loads of turning movements across your side roads, you've probably got a problem right there, and you might be wanting to look at a low traffic neighbourhood back behind those side roads and where they go. And I think, again, to that kind of turning movements and shunting conversation, I was just going to say again, like the more you're reducing those turning movements, the less you're actually slowing down the main road traffic, because there's not loads of people jockeying to get in and out. So just was going to, you know, point that bit out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always the combination of stuff. There's no one thing that rules anything. There's different things applied in different contexts. Anything you can do to reduce through traffic on roads that it shouldn't be handling is a great way to go. And that's one of the things I said to DFT as well. I'm really looking for a kind of a quiet residential street approach in there that would give people confidence to get to the other side of it. Not necessarily what you do on an A road off it, although it would probably help. It would still be like, you know, you might want to consider some other options first of how many vehicles are turning in and out, as Simon says there. But okay, we've got a Don. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, please, Brian. It's just a question about lobbying, really. So we've got the Manchester FOE petition to grant chaps. Do you think, alongside that, will it be really effective if we can persuade some of our highway authorities to say, yes, we're up for that? I mean, would there be like a critical number that if they get an indication that there's 20 highway authorities that are up for doing it, do you think that might just tip it?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. To an extent, like London's been putting a lot of stock in the continuous footways, and they're great and they're fantastic. And like, okay, they've been rolling them out a bit at a time, but this is something that we could do en masse. So yeah, I mean, part of the reason of doing this is to have a discussion and see what ideas coming up. But I have thought of that if other people's were strong about it. At the moment, the only real like formal involvement from another authority is Camden. God bless them. There's a reason I spent like 6 years there, but they've stepped up saying actually this would be really useful for us as well. I think a lot of other local authorities are watching going, oh, he's got no chance. Oh, will it come through? Maybe that'll be good to have in there. But I think if there was like a call from like many local authorities saying actually, yeah, this could be a real winner for us, that would help. But then we're going to try and do the communications around that post the research. I'm just like really just pressing the frustration button now that we haven't been able to conclude that research and like, well, what can we do in the meantime? When you know you think you've got a pretty good idea that this is a solution to a lot of the issues we're facing at the moment, it's frustrating not being able to put it out there. So yes was the really simple answer to that question in there. Wouldn't that be great if there was some kind of collective way for local authorities to say, yeah, we want this? You know, there are a few organisations that might help, but that would be good. Keep up the good work, friends of the earth.
So if we're currently lobbying in Liverpool City Regional 6 councils about COVID interventions, if we put it to them, this side road zebra priority, and a couple of them said, yeah, we'll go for it, that would be really, really useful, wouldn't it? Obviously, I don't know Absolutely. That, but if we put that question there, they might just say yes. It's got to be asked, isn't it?
Most people say, yeah, that'd be great. Oh, yeah, we can't do it. I remember, like, I'll mention again, Jesse Norman. I went and did a talk in Hereford, like his constituency, and I was talking about side road zebras in there. And then, like, someone asked, oh, Jesse, shall we just do that? And he stood up and, like, double thumbs up. Yeah, of course we can. That's a brilliant idea. Why wouldn't we want to do that? And then the next time I spoke to him, was like, oh, yeah, there's all these legal reasons, Brian, that we can't do it. So I think most people get it. It's just, I suppose a lot of local authorities have been frustrated about trying to do rule changes in the past and think, oh, this is just, it'll take too much time. We'll spend resources on it. We don't necessarily think we'll get anything back in them. We're trying to get people to think, yeah, well, no, we can do this. There's a possibility we can make change happen, and if we can't do it in the current climate, then when? Any other comments or discussions to go in there? I'm not sure Bob Davis has even managed to get in there. Like, bless him. I think I managed to shut him out. But have we got any more points on this? I'll happily talk about.
I'm here, Brian.
Hey, you're here. You're here. Brilliant. All right, so I'll just ask it. Yeah, so has anybody got any burning questions on side road zebras, or should we move on to Bob's update?
Yeah, Brian.
Yep.
When we're designing side road zebras and the continuous footpaths, do we have to take into account the side road crossings? Sorry, the sight lines for cars coming out, because we don't want them blocking zebras trying to pull out into traffic.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, and it's something that we've been looking at. And what I always brief Chris Boardman to say when this one comes up is that if that first car's blocking it when you're trying to cross, that's a bit annoying. But the second one will see that you wait and see the zebra there and be much more likely to give way to you so you can cross. Whereas if there's no zebra there, the first one will go, the second one will go, the third one will go, and you'll never get across that bloody road in there. So even if cars are rolling up and actually sat on it and you can't get across it from one point, for me, it's still a vastly improved situation in there. So yeah, it's not like if you're doing a continuous footway, then yes, then there's a formal give way that's set back before the junction in there, and then you think, well, can you actually see there? And in practice, what people do is kind of roll up to that give way on the continuous footways in there, have a little look, and then edge the way across. And there's some really good research from Transport for London showing the kind of behaviours of drivers around there. But all the behaviour is quite good. It's all the stuff that we want cars to do, not just zoom out, assuming priority, to get up to it, think, what's going on here? Have a little look, slow down. Oh, are they coming? They don't even know. All that stuff's keeping the pedestrians and cyclists safe. So to an extent, you kind of want that uncertainty. And again, it's that perfection thing. You can't guarantee when you walk up to a side road zebra that it's going to be clear, and you walk across there might well be a car waiting to turn that's sat right in the middle of it. But the next one, much more likely to give you priority once you're established.
Okay, so this is the update at the beginning of the 8th week. Do go back to the original article to why we have to do stuff, and we've been doing updates every week. I haven't put this one on the site yet. It'll go up later this evening. So don't worry about trying to copy all the links or anything. They'll be up on the site later tonight. Just a quick kind of personal word. I've been in this game for about 35 years as a campaigner, as a transport planner in local government, cycling officer, chair of the Introduction Forum, journalist, broadcaster. And it does actually really seem like something may actually happen for cycling now. And I know it's a very weird time, but that's what it kind of feels like. So remember, this is what's happened in the week since last Tuesday. So Prime Minister House of Commons said this should be a new golden age for cycling on the 6th. Community Secretary talked about considering how we can create more room in town centres for pedestrians and make it easier to cycle or walk to work. It's a letter from the campaigning groups to lock in the benefits of less traffic. And then, yes, then on the 10th, Prime Minister said go to work in a car, or even better, by bicycle. A lot of people were saying, oh, he should have said go to work by bicycle, and if you can't buy a car. But anyway, they've been saying those things. And here are the relevant things that were introduced by the Minister on Saturday, the press release, the full announcement, and a video of him saying the main points. You should all have read that main announcement. It is going to be tremendously important. Some comments on it by Carlton Reid, and some sort of kind of raining on the parade comments from Mark Philpotts on his blog spot. But let's look at what Chris Boardman says, and saying we've never seen anything like this before. The cash has given cycling as a mode of transport a new status, not for ideological reasons, but for practical ones. He also said wording in the announcement was strong, unequivocal, and backed up by legislation with similarly clear wording for councils. We've never seen anything like this before, step change, etc. Now, I do remember Don Matthew talking about step changes, sea changes, etc. in the 90s. Don's still with us somewhere, and I don't know if he's still campaigning much, and he's not probably on Zoom. but those of us who are a bit older tend to remember those things. But anyway, those comments. And the thing from the All Party Parliamentary Walking and Cycling Group, the most significant announcement in the new fast-track statutory guidance and effective immediately is that councils are required, note that wording, for significantly increased numbers of cyclists and pedestrians by reallocating road space. And there's also the issue about the government being able to take control of highways powers from councils that don't comply. I don't know how that's going to work out. I welcome your comments about under which legislation that might be relevant. Let's just go through it point by point. My comments are in red. So first of all, there's a national cycling and walking plan to be published next month. One was kind of due anyway, but look for that a few weeks' time. Renewed commitment to double cycling and increase walking by 2025. There was already commitment. One little point I've made, being kind of cynical, is that we may get smaller numbers of journeys. Therefore, if you're talking about cycling in terms of a modal share, it wouldn't have to go up so much in order to get to the target, because the modal share would have gone up. Anyway, that might just be my cynicism. The money announced, as everybody noticed to start off with, the £2 billion was already announced, so it wasn't new. What is new is under 4, the £250 million emergency fund for the pop-up stuff. Number 5, a new national cycling and walking champion and inspectorate. Well, we've seen champions. How much authority do they have? I don't know. But Phil Jones did say inspectorate is an interesting word. It looks kind of like you have to. Number 6 is legal changes to protect vulnerable road users. That's yet to be announced. We don't know what that is. It could be a form of driver liability. We don't know. 1 zero emission city, the creation of long-term cycling program, e-scooter trials. I'm not big on e-scooter trials, but let's do that another time. A voucher scheme for bike repairs and maintenance, and plans to boost bike fixing facilities. I haven't seen any detail on that. We're still waiting for that. I think this is pretty critical. I ran a program at Ealing Council called Direct Support for Cycling, very much about newbies and people who are returning. What do they do with the old bike in the back shed? Halfords have announced that they're going to do some free bike fixing, but I don't know if that's a blessing or not, bearing in mind it's Halfords. So it would be good to see money put into that area. Closer links to the NHS, well, we'll see what that is. And then finally, higher standards for permanent infrastructure, which is about the long-awaited new local transport note, which Phil Jones and others have been working on, which we've been waiting for however long, I don't know. Anyway, that's it point by point. And you've got your new signs. So let's look at stuff that's happening in the UK over the last week. There's been a survey of councils by Chris Canyon of Labour Cycles. Go and have a look at that. So here's some stuff. Brighton, there's a mandatory cycle lane with the kind of usual problems of painted cycle lanes, like here you are coming up to a junction, coming up to a refuge there, and it stops. So there's been some stuff, I think Mark Strong has tweeted about that, and you can go into the story of that. That's Brighton. Cambridge, actually, Roxanne pointed out that the stuff looked like it was going to happen in Cambridge. And the mayor of Oxford has been saying Yeah, we can't go back to normal after this. Future traffic planning must revolve around walking and cycling. So, you know, again, nothing concrete, but some good noises. Here's some other stuff I've picked up. This is an off-road path from Chester to the Wirral, which has been closed. Bit of annoying stuff about that. Manchester has done this footway extension in Princess Street, which I thought, oh yeah, that looks good. But apparently people don't walk much down there. It's not a big deal. You know, I leave that to the Manchester people to say. And I did pick up this one, Urmston in Greater Manchester. And it's, you know, this is really, they're not getting it. You know, they are not getting it. It's a few cones outside the chippy, you know. It really isn't the kind of road space reallocation we want to get, but, you know, fingers crossed. Right, now London. So the thing by London Travel Watch, 61% of Londoners plan to walk or cycle more after the lockdown. Yippee! More worryingly, 53% of Londoners plan to drive more after the lockdown. Boo. Okay, now we had a launch on the 6th of May from the Mayor and Will Norman, etc. And the big news is Euston Road and Park Lane are announced as flagship temporary cycle lanes. And we've had the tweets from the Mayor, journey to Greener London will be made by foot and bike, can't be clogged with cars, we've been working with the councils, Hackney to Hounslow, Pimlico to Putney, ba 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 ba. And this is the hashtag that came out last week in my update. That's the one to look for in London. Okay, now with regard to London, do read these two articles, which were by Simon. The first one was saying that Will Norman's called the emergency street space plan, radical, unparalleled in a city London size. So theoretically, we could go above Paris's 650 kilometers of emergency cycle tracks. Don't forget, Paris are talking about taking out 70% of car parking. And TfL also work with the boroughs, etc. It's been pointed out, everybody says the congestion charge, ULEZ, LES are currently suspended. The on D is it will take a long time to reinstate these. So, you know, we don't know what's happening, but really they do have to go back in. I would also say raise the issue of congestion charging, smarter charging, whatever it is, elsewhere. And again, this, you know, the right kind of tone. This is, everything is in the balance. This is really pivotal time. Okay, the next article Simon wrote was, you know, where's the money? Because the money we've seen announced from the Prime Minister and Will Norman and Prime Minister and Grant Shapps is for the UK or England and Wales outside London. Now, my little birds have been saying for about a week and a bit that about 50 million was promised to TfL to work on schemes in central London, with central London boroughs. I haven't heard anything more. You know, watch this space. Okay, so let's just look at some stuff which has happened on the ground in the boroughs. So on a TfL road in Brixton, at a bus stop, there's a big extension there, all marked, that's nice. A lot of stonking great campaigning in Brent by Sylvia. I mentioned this last time, there's a nice graphic. Enfield, they're getting into that bike fixing stuff already. That's good. And here they are. This is a scheme which was due to go. I don't know if they were going to have these extra bits and pieces. I'm not quite sure what these are. These are kind of wands which are in a sort of thing which is screwed down, presumably. That was on a scheme due to happen anyway, I think. Hackney, this is the notice which was used for Broadway Market, which I mentioned last week. The latest is they're going to start off with the filtered permeabilities, starting off at Barnabas Street, quite important street. And what seems to be the case is that Councillor Burke is emboldened by the announcement on Saturday, and so there is extra impetus for what he decided to do. It's a nice kind of grassroots campaign in Islington. I love clean air. Croydon's put in its planter on one of its streets, Lancaster Road, I think. Merton's got a nice campaigning open letter, which we signed, which I think will be going on our website. Westminster, of all people, have been looking to aim higher on air quality. They had some kind of committee report saying, yeah, we need to do a lot better. That's kind of encouraging from Westminster. Now, just a thing that I've been noticing, there's a lot of the anti-cycling prejudice, which I think really fighting this is an absolute priority. And, you know, this is a thing from Road Safety Great Britain in the Northeast, who are one of my bugbears, telling motorists that if you are taking your family out, go on the quieter roads, which is presumably where they'll meet more speeding drivers who'll wipe those kids out despite their magic hats and magic high vis. It's been a lot of, oh, not everybody can ride a bicycle, not everybody can ride a bicycle. Councillor in Barnet is being jumped on about saying that. Paying a tax, take a test, third-party insurance, number plates, breaking the law, killing pedestrians, strain on the NHS, cycling's for poor people or rich people or athletes or hippies or people in other countries. Yeah, do say crash, not accident. So I think that's an absolutely crucial thing that we'll have to fight. I would like to see Mr. Gilligan, you know, I am available, Andrew, to assist in the fight, which will have to happen. And I think we need to do road danger reduction training in local authorities, precisely on that, destroying the mythologies. So that's the graphic that the government goes out, and I shall see you next week. Any questions, peeps?
Because I'm going off to Old Shoreham Road right now, so I wanted to speak briefly before I go. So yeah, so I don't know if anyone can correct me, and I'm willing to be happy to be corrected. But Brighton is saying this is the first COVID pandemic pop-up lane in the country, and I don't know what that means. Leicester's was, because I think Leicester's was a pop-up lane. So if anyone willing to disagree, I'm very happy to cede that. It's nothing to do with me. But it's a typical example, as Bob said, of something being put in almost tactically rather than strategically. And they're very proud of it. But on the other hand, it has all the flaws that it's been having. Well, I've just come off our local transport partnership meeting where there's a whole load of other things being proposed. So they are proposing to do things, but there's all sorts of things they're not proposing to do, which is quite disappointing. So we'll have to just wait and see. But I think one of the problems is everyone's doing lots of different things separately. And we're all just rushing off and doing our own things. There's very little coordination between councils. And I think that's something that people who are officers maybe need to get together, maybe on the a DFT base camp group, and talk to each other about that. Because I think it's just, there's a lot of willy-nilly knee-jerk stuff going on. And on the funding, everyone seems to have a different take. But I've been talking to Nicola just now. All DFT funding is England only outside London, unless it explicitly says otherwise, and it doesn't explicitly say otherwise. Therefore, this is only immediate, and the 2 billion is smoke and mirrors until they actually announce it. And the final thing I wanted to say is the inspectorate. I noticed Tim's here and Ken's here. We were the inspectors from 2002 to 2005. We were the English Regional Cycling Development Team. We were the government cycling inspectors. And we all got shot because we told the councils that they were crap. And instead of doing better, they got rid of us all. So the warning is, if all you do is set up an inspectorate without giving it teeth, without giving it powers to actually act and enforce that inspection, the same thing will happen. We'll just say, you're doing rubbish, and the councils will get upset, and it won't do it. You know, I hate to be the person who says we tried it before. Let's learn from the mistakes that happened 15 years ago and do it better this time.
Does anybody have a clue how this money is actually going to be allocated? Because obviously there's a big headline figure, this 250 million for temporary, fast-moving infrastructure, but still no sign of any information on how that's actually getting out to local authorities and how it's going to be divvied up. Does anybody have any insight there?
I think it'll be competitive from what I'm hearing. So that means, as in all things, money goes to ambition, not necessarily to need there, unless those that actually need it actually have the ambition to do something bold. There's a little bit of double speak there. But yeah, that's what I'm hearing. If people come up with solid plans and kind of pitch them to the government, but I don't know beyond that at the moment.
And are LC whips likely to have an influence on that process, do you think, as you know, working in an authority that's just had theirs approved?
I think so. That's my reading of it, particularly as it was specifically mentioned in the announcement to carry on things that are already being done in development, you know, to move on to accelerate things. For me, that I read that as pointing straight at LC whips in there. But there's others that saying that. I think Mark was making this point the other week that maybe the LC whips need to up their game a little bit to address the new issues that come about with the crisis in there. But for me, they're a starter, and I felt that's what that was hinting at. Don't know if anybody else has got a different view. There you go, that's the word.
Thanks, Brian.
So, after the presentation that you very kindly allowed me to do a few weeks ago, a few people from either ends of the campaigning spectrum got back to me, actually. One of whom was speaking to XR, and it turns out they were formulating a plan, which I have been inputting into, which has culminated in a couple of actions being lined up this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. There is a no going back, reclaim the streets, so which means that Saturday people are invited to get out and mark on the road with a cycle stencil where they are going to be riding on Sunday, basically. There's a couple of other points within the document as well, which I'll share in the chat. But I think the main points are the marking on Saturday, and then there will be a ride on Sunday. So people coalescing and riding in the same direction, obviously very carefully socially distanced around the roads in the local urban areas on Sunday. And I've been trying to encourage the local groups to get out and do this, because I think this will have far greater impact in the smaller towns and cities in the UK, and boroughs and cities within the UK. I mean, down here in Exeter, our local authority this has been spurring me on actually quite a lot with this action, because our local authority down here in the West Country have done nothing so far. Devon have not even acknowledged that there is going to be any need for change publicly as we come out of this lockdown period. So, you know, whilst there are some people, there are some groups within cities that some local authorities that have done stuff, some a lot more than others. Mark Strong has just given some highlights there, and obviously there's the RDRF stuff that we all get to see every week. There's still plenty of areas in the UK where there is absolutely nothing. And the other thing I would say is that whilst whilst the government is talking in billions now for the first time with regard to cycling spending, the UN said in 2016 we need £6 billion a year, 20% of DFT budget to go for cycling, not active transport, not public transport, just cycling specifically. So that 20%, as far as we're concerned, is £6 billion. We're still way off that. We're at £400 million a year, which is the breakdown of the 2 billion. So I will pop the link in the chat, and would very much appreciate people turning up for local rides on Sunday. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Cass. But just the word on money. We often have this discussion. I want to talk to government, which occasionally I'm allowed to do in there, and I had it out with Andrew as well when he's commissioner in there. It's the fact, like, we could say, right, there's 100 billion a week to spend on cycling in there, but like you say, most local authorities aren't interested, and that's just like £100 billion worth of problems that you're just giving them that they've got to account for, and then they've got to deal with all the repercussions of it. So there's still a certain amount of politics to be won over locally to get people to actually buy into these things. It's a ridiculous thing to say at the moment when the economy's crashing there, but the money's never necessarily been the problem with cycling. It's getting people to do it and take on the hassle in there, and that's what we have to look at out locally. I think that's just my comment on that one.
I completely agree, Brian. You know, listening to what Robert was saying a minute ago, to what Bob was saying, that you know, we could have a cycling czar that could have an inspectorate power to come and speak to local authorities. I don't want that. I want my local authorities to be engaged in change.
Casper, hi. I'm in Manchester and also have been active with XR, so I'm asking this more as a question representing things that have been shared with me, not my own opinion, but there's definitely people in Manchester who've raised concerns to me about this action that I'd just be interested in others' views on the call, including your own, about the potential for it to backfire. We heard from Rob earlier about, you know, the basically there is anti-cycling hostility being deliberately whipped up, the tabloids using telephoto lenses, etc. So there's concern that, you know, this protest could be used in that light, i.e. let's portray it as a bunch of cyclists being knobs and not what it's intended to do. So I'm not sharing that as my personal view. I'm sharing that that's a concern that people have raised. And what's the kind of feedback on that?
So certainly speaking from the point of view of a active cycling campaigner who has been involved in direct action for a while, I'm very used to the press taking this line. And certainly Extinction Rebellion is also very used to the press. There's no action that Extinction Rebellion will do that where parts of the press will not take this line, you know. And I think if we were afraid of that, then we've lost. I think, you know, this is exactly the right time to be getting out there and highlighting this issue at the moment. This is when the change needs to happen. This is the moment, the opportunity that the local authorities have to make this change, to make our urban areas safe for us when we start to come out of lockdown. So yeah, I completely understand what you're saying, but I don't think that should stop us. You know, there is a media and messaging strategy in how to deal with that. And interestingly, I did a interview for the Eye earlier on today. They didn't even touch that. They were interested only in the transport issues and safety.
I think the worry will be it's not about the Eye, it's about, you know, the red tops and the tabloids. So does anyone else on the call have any concerns about this? Because it would be good actually for me to take back from this call to those people who've raised concerns to me that actually there's a lot of people who don't have concerns about this.
I mean, my thing, having done different kinds of campaigning and working in sort of local government, is that there are particular problems at the moment in that there is the issue of social distancing, which kind of, it doesn't really go in with a sort of kind of demonstration. But the other thing which would trouble me is that where these things work really well is as kind of attention gainers. And, you know, we've had the attention gaining from government. Our thing now is really much more, this is my view, you know, everybody has to take their own path, is to sort of actually work on getting that pressure, doing all this nitty-gritty stuff about getting the local authorities and government to actually do the stuff which we want to see. So it's, you know, it's at a different end of the spectrum, and I mean that's personally where I think we need to focus now. But you know, individuals make their own choices.
I just want to come in on that as well. Just wanted to make this point is kind of touched on before from the announcement of the powers that the government have for those that do nothing at the moment. And I think that's a really powerful case that you can make locally in there. It's very much going to be on them if there's another peak and we've highlighted it to areas and they haven't done anything and there's been this list given from the government and money put up there. It's like, for me, that's I was going to use very strong language there, but it is not good. And I think there's a way of making a very convincing argument to local authorities. You've got this issue. I've sent you this picture. The government have said in there they can enact powers to come in and do things on your behalf. It's quite a strong legal language in there, and that's why I was so happy with the statement. I have to say on Saturday night, it's like this is bold, as Bob said as well. Make the case, but you can make it in fairly strong legal terms now. The government's trying to make that case with us at the moment. Let's not forget that.
But can I urge everyone to take over the Get Peddling hashtag that was used for the launch of these this funding and these initiatives from the government with 3 white male elite Olympic sports cyclists, which is, I think, actually the opposite message we should be using. So we're really, really pushing everyone to use the hashtag Get Pedaling and show your everyday cycling, give your tips for people who are starting to cycle. But let's just make this the campaign it should have been. And I'd also suggest using hashtag Get Walking with that as well, because it's not just about cycling, it's also about walking. And while I'm here, my 2 cents about the Extinction Rebellion stuff, I'm not against what they want to do and what their messages are, and I agree that this is the right time. We just need to really make sure that this is about space and stopping cars, not about people wanting to have a bike ride. And I know that's not what it is about, but just, I don't even know what's going to happen in Cambridge, but I'm just so worried that it's going to really annoy those councillors and they're going to shut the door to the conversations we're having. So I know that you need that kind of work, but if it actually just shuts down and people just put up the blinkers, we're not going to get anywhere. So just make it about space, put in planters, paint the road, do all this stuff. Don't just do a bike ride is all I'll say. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
No, I think that's really important about the messaging in there and the normalising of it all. And I'm in a household with 3 women, so I have to agree. That's a much more sensible ratio for decision making.
Cycle training, which has been stopped. Surely it's time to reinstate that as quickly as possible, especially as children are potentially not carriers or givers or whatever. There's a lot of cycle trainers out there demanding to work.
Yeah, it should be done on a one-to-one basis. I can see no reason. I've been saying this since the beginning. Cycle trainers can be designated as key workers. They are taught how to be able to train on a one-to-one basis. Absolutely disgraceful that hasn't been pushed at the moment.
Yeah, just on that, definitely trying to push it up in Greater Manchester and trying to get people interested. There's a webinar coming up. They haven't sent me a link yet with the cycle trainers where we're going to attempt to make that case. For me, now's the time we should absolutely be doing adult cycle training, should be at the top of the list as far as I'm concerned. There's new people that are giving it a go, having kind of buddies to take you on the route you need to go to. And for me, that's sensible employers should be demanding that. And I'm hoping we can sort of start responding to that in the next phase. So